They say that a weapon is only as good as what it's made of. An ironclad opinion in a lot of ways, but to say it stops there would be stealing from what could be. See, materials can truly elevate weapons and armors to mithrilic proportions, and I'm truly adamantine in this thought. Anyway, no need to look too darkwoodly at it. Let's talk about special materials. Hi everyone, the voice you're hearing is mine. I am Obscura, and the lovely visage you see before you is my Eldritch buddy Deaton. We're in a shared body situation, but you don't have to worry about that because today we're going to be talking about special materials in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. See, special materials are interesting and very evocative. Cold iron to wound the Fae, silver bullets for a werewolf, wooden stakes for vampires, even salt for other creatures like the Akata. There is something iconic about weapons and armor made of different materials, and it's something that is quite often a character fantasy for players. But in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, it's something of a controversial topic. As for the most part, special materials are kind of peripheral and don't really add anything. Now, of course, there's some of the obvious advantages, like exploiting the weakness of some creatures and getting around the resistances of others, but it could be so much more. So today we're going to talk about some of the mechanics, how they work, what can be done to help, and some theoretical answers that we may be able to design. Mechanically speaking, special materials for weapons don't do much unless the creature they're being used against has a weakness to them, or if they have a resistance that can be bypassed by it. Armor for the most part has an even more limited use, with a creature with a weakness to it that critically fails an unarmed strike against the armor becoming sickened. Moreover, if you want to make a magic item out of a special material of a higher level, you need to use a higher grade versions of the same material. This makes it an expensive prospect for what feels like a very limited advantage. Why this is, I don't honestly know. Though an assumption could be made that this is to stop another level of power creep, and to be honest, in the right situations, special materials are still quite powerful. But outside of those situations, how do we help players tell the story they want to with their silver armor or cold iron hammer? Now, the solution I use most often is a slight alteration on the Witcher method. Broad strokes, in The Witcher, Geralt wields two different swords, one of steel, the other of silver. The reason behind this is that the steel sword is for use against humans, as steel is a stronger metal and better to use against other weapons and armor. Whereas the silver sword is used for monsters, as the creatures in that world tend to be more effectively wounded by silver. So how do I apply this to my Pathfinder games? Simple. If a creature has a weakness or a resistance bypassed by a specific material, I just change it from whatever the material it is to the one most often used by the party. So if the party has latched onto silver as their material of choice, I will tend to shift material weakness to other creatures to silver as well. So if a creature has a weakness to cold iron, I just swap it to silver. You'd be amazed at how quickly this expands the options and subtly starts to encourage the party to adopt a material to be more and more a part of their kit. You can take this further by using the resistances and weaknesses chart in the building creatures section of the GM core to just give creatures the required weakness. You can usually pick a number between the maximum and the minimum and be good to go. Players with a more thorough knowledge of the system might ask questions if they suddenly go up against Fae that are weak to silver, for instance. But often, if you have a conversation with players about this, in particular during a session 0 or a session 0.5, they're usually okay with it. Not having to spread out their weapons amongst a bunch of different materials is usually welcomed. For you as the GM, it also makes treasure a lot easier, as you can just drop bars of the chosen special material in the loot piles and be good to go. The question you might be asking though is, will this unbalance the creature? Well, the short answer is no. If the creature already had a weakness, it was balanced with that weakness in mind, so switching them from one material to another is not going to break anything. Usually the main reason this isn't standard practice is tradition, but it's our tables and we're allowed to question tradition. As for giving weaknesses to creatures that normally don't have one, that's a slightly more complicated answer, and with going too far into it, it's fine, I promise. Especially if you're using the minimum numbers as given in the resistance and weakness chart. Remember, this is rewarding players for dedicating to a certain material for their kit, leaning into those thematics. If you want to be more enterprising and really assist players to lean into those materials, you could take a similar approach to what I did in Gatewalkers for the character of Antara. I wrote up an archetype for a character called a Star Warden. The idea was to lean into some of the space and astrology themes of the adventure path. As a part of that, I noticed that many of the creatures they'd be facing down the adventure path would be aberrations. So what I did was, I wrote a feat for that archetype that would give aberrations she struck with silver weapons a weakness to silver equal to half her level. In a similar vein, I did something similar for armor, with a different feat. If she wears silver armor, creatures with a weakness to silver will find that their spells have a harder time affecting her. In this case, there was a slight investment on the part of the player, that of a class feat, in order to get an advantage against those creatures. Because of that investment, however, we got more of a power level to play with, so in this way it's balanced and you can do something similar in your own games. Also, as an aside, if people want me to do a video on making your own archetypes, leave a comment below, and I'll put it on the list to work on it. To summarize, you can make special materials pop a little bit more at your tables by condensing the special material interactions down to one. Once you've done that, expanding the creatures affected by those special materials by using the resistance and weakness table should you want to. Finally, you can also make bespoke feats or even a whole archetype if you're up for it. In closing, special materials can add some interesting dimensions to your PF2 games, and with a little bit of wiggling around, your players can really get some extra use out of them. As always, don't be afraid to do some tinkering in your own games. The system is pretty robust and hard to break so long as you don't go too crazy with the numbers. All that said, I hope this video helps, and if you liked it and you want to see more, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Also, if you want to help support the channel, I have my Patreon where you can help support what we do here, like these wonderful people. The link for that is down below. I also stream Pathfinder 2 sessions a couple of times a week on Twitch. There's also links to my first major release, Black Powder Magic and Blood. We've almost reached silver already, thank you so much. Anyway, I've talked for long enough. I hope you have a good day, a good night, a good week, no matter where you are in the world. And remember, as always, we are the storytellers. Goodbye, everyone.